Ladies and gentlemen, we're back once again with the top 10 guns in Call of Duty Mobile. I don't think we posted this video last season, so we've got a lot of changes to this list. Some of it due to buffs and nerfs, some due to new guns added, and some just due to people figuring out that some guns are really freaking good and we didn't realize before. Drop a like if you want to see more COD Mobile content on the channel, and we'll go ahead and hop into it. I'm not going to go super in-depth on our honorable mentions, but just a quick rundown for those of you who are looking for some off-meta options. UL, QXR, Switchblade, PKM, and Kilo are all top tier options that very well could have made their way into this top 10 guns list, and in the hands of the right player can absolutely outgun some of the options that are closer to the bottom of our top 10 guns. Coming in at number 10, we've got a gun that was previously pretty close, if not at the #1 spot on this list, and just dropped down because other guns got buffed a lot more, and because it did get some tiny nerfs along the way. The Grau is still definitely a super solid option, especially if you're looking for a really versatile gun with a really solid blueprint that's available for free-to-play players. Obviously, one of the big upsides, as always with this gun, is the ability to change the iron sights with different barrels, with the Archangel having easily the cleanest iron sight of all the options. It doesn't really have any prime time to kill in any of the ranges, which is why it's not higher on the list, but because it is so versatile, it can thrive in different ranges against weapons that are being used outside of their proper areas. Coming in at number 9 on the list, we have the only shotgun inside of our top 10. Anybody who's watched competitive COD Mobile over the past year won't be surprised to see the R9 right here. The beauty of the R9 is that it's one of the only shotguns that's really able to take semi-mid-range gunfights while at the same time still thriving up close. Quick tip for those of you using the R9 for the first time: you can actually hold down the shoot button and shoot the 2 shots in succession rather than having to constantly tap it. That's not something that I learned until way too long into the game, but basically you can do one long hold, let your finger up, and then another long hold to hit 4 shots. Once I figured this out, this thing became way more deadly because I stopped having these accidental one-shots where I thought it was going to shoot 2, especially when you're lining up your shots. The consistency with which you're going to be taking down enemies is absolutely ridiculous. Obviously, being a shotgun, it is one of the more limited weapons on this list, so there are specific maps where it's going to thrive more, but with the proper playstyle, you can use this pretty much anywhere. Coming in at number 8 is a gun that I've kind of gone back and forth on as to whether or not I think it should be meta, just because it is so much better with the mythic version of the gun than without it. The Fennec is no question still a top tier SMG, even though it might not be the easiest to use. The mobility and the time to kill on the Fennec up close are obviously its 2 biggest upsides, and even without the mythic variant, can be built in different ways that you're certainly able to win the majority of your up close gunfights. And obviously the biggest struggle is going to be in the long range, as it doesn't really have any type of bullet spread accuracy, and the vertical recoil is pretty tough to control. Naturally, for a true SMG main, you're not going to be taking a whole lot of long range gunfights anyway, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. But obviously the base iron sights aren't the cleanest as well, so if you don't have a really solid epic variant or the mythic version, you do kind of have to decide whether or not you want to build solely for the close range and take the L of not having clean iron sights, or if you want to lose out on an attachment and run a red dot. Coming in at number 7, we've got the SKS. I feel like this one goes without much explaining, but obviously this is still the long range king of COD Mobile if you're able to master it. The main reason that it's not higher on the list is because it is one of the more difficult to use options, and also can be somewhat limiting depending on what number of fingers you use to play. And obviously the fact that it does have a slower rate of fire also makes it much more punishing than the majority of the other weapons on this list. With that being said, in 2020 champs, we saw what it can do when it's in the hands of players who have mastered it, as it completely dominated the competition and is the reason that it's now banned from competitive play. Base version also has really clean iron sights, so there's no need to buy a fancy blueprint, but there's definitely some solid ones out there if you want to pick one up. The fact that coming in at number 6 we have our #1 SMG in the game, I think tells you a lot about how much of an AR meta that we're in. I would argue the CX9 is currently the #1 SMG in the game for a few different reasons. Number 1, even though it's not going to be quite as fast on the time to kill, the CX9 is a very viable competitor to the Fennec when using the 50-round drum mag for a few different reasons. Number 1, it has much lower recoil. Number 2, it has the capacity for a larger magazine. Number 3, it has more versatility in the way that you can build it out with different attachments. And on top of that, the base irons for this are way cleaner than those of the Fennec. But the main reason that we've got the CX9 as high as we do is because of the 12-round burst magazine and how powerful it is, giving a massive boost to both damage and to movement speed. This is a dream attachment for movement gods. The combination of the low recoil on the weapon and the fact that it kills so quickly makes it completely lethal up close, and for accurate players still able to take some gunfights in mid to long range as well. Obviously this is an attachment that takes a little while to master because it is so limited in its magazine capacity. I definitely recommend running Gung Ho and Skulker with this, because if you do end up needing to reload, you can still have decent movement speed in the midst of it and can still potentially win gunfights gunfights with a reload necessary. The burst mag is actually so powerful it got banned from competitive play. If you haven't given it a try, I would definitely recommend it. Coming up next at number 5 is a gun that I really didn't have anywhere close to my top 10. It was a gun that felt good whenever I tried it when it last got buffed, but I and most other people did not realize how impactful those buffs were going to be until it started to take over the Chinese competitive meta. One of the biggest downsides for the Odin previously was the fact that it was super inconsistent in its ability to 2-tap because of the hand multipliers. And even though the hand multiplier buffs that the weapon got in most recent updates weren't by a huge amount, they were an amount that was large enough to make it so that if you were to land a hand shot in either an upper arm shot or an upper body shot, you would be able to 2-tap as compared to previously where it would pretty much make it impossible for you to 2-tap by hitting hands, which is something you're gonna do a lot whenever you're in a face-to-face gunfight with somebody else that's holding up their gun. Obviously, the Odin is a high skill weapon given the fact that it is the gun with the lowest rate of fire on this list outside of the SKS. It's also not higher on the list because obviously the 2-tap time to kill is insanely fast, but it's a weapon that is a lot better if you have the mythic than if you don't, as obviously it doesn't have the cleanest of iron sights. It's still usable without a red dot, but definitely not preferable. Coming in at number 4, we've got yet another AR, and if you're not a fan of assault rifles, I don't have very good news for you on the rest of this list. The Type 19 is another assault rifle that a lot of people didn't really rate very highly upon its arrival. It got a couple of minor buffs here and there, but it wasn't really anything that was super impactful, at least not from what we thought initially. However, especially with the mythic variant added on for the Type 19, it's an incredibly accurate gun that basically functions similarly to an upgraded Grout. Much like a lot of assault rifles in the game right now, one of the big upsides is the ability to decrease the time to kill with upper body and headshot multipliers. With a medium rate of fire, pretty low recoil, and the fact that even the base version of the gun has solid iron sights, the Type 19 has become a favorite option for both pro players and for ranked warriors. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the big upsides for the gun is its headshot multiplier at a 1.5, meaning that with one headshot, you can 3-tap within the first damage range, and the gun's second damage phase extends a lot further than the majority of other alternatives, making this arguably the most consistent mid-range weapon in the game. Coming in at number 3, we have a gun that, despite the fact that its best attachment was banned from competitive play, was still one of the top guns that we saw used in Masters, and if you've played ranked at all, you've definitely seen it abused in a big way there as well. The DRH is still a phenomenal option regardless of whether or not you're using the OTM magazine, and even though the OTM mag did get a small nerf last season to where it's no longer able to 2-tap to the head, it's still easily one of the top guns in the game. Of the ARs on this list, the DRH is honestly probably one of the more aggressive ones, and even though it has a slower rate of fire than most of the other options because it also has really good bullet spread accuracy, assuming you're a player who knows how to hit their shots, that rate of fire is not going to slow you down a whole lot. Obviously, one of the biggest upsides to the OTM magazine is the fact that it increases your 3-tap consistency pretty substantially. The biggest question that I get the most about the DRH is whether or not to use the 25 or the 30 round OTM. And personally, I like the 25 round just because it has no downside, and because it does have a slower rate of fire, you're not going to run out of ammo all that often. But if you do find yourself missing a couple of extra shots and need some more ammo, the 30 rounds definitely worth a try. And obviously, the fact that this is one of the only free legendaries in the game makes it an even bigger bonus. Coming in at number 2, if you've played ranked at all this season, you're probably not too surprised to see the MG42. You guys proud of me for saying the right name? I kind of had mixed feelings about the MG42 whenever I first tried it out. Obviously, it felt really solid, but just because there's so many different attachments that have really big upsides and really big downsides, I didn't really know how to build out the gun effectively. However, once I started to refine some of those builds and also looking at some of the input from pro players that had tried the gun out, it's pretty obvious that this is a gun that is going to dominate both in ranked and in competitive play if it doesn't get banned. One of the big reasons the MG42 is as good as it is it has 3 different attachments that increase its rate of fire. The recoil booster does that while having very, very minimal downside. It also has a barrel in the Krausnik rapid fire barrel, which definitely has more substantial downside, but whenever you combine it with the Arasaka 125 mag, interestingly enough, I didn't even realize this until a couple days in, but if you scroll down on the upsides for this, it also has a fire interval increase there as well. So when you throw all 3 of those attachments on there and compare it to the fastest firing gun in the game outside of the MG82 in the Mac 10, it still beats it out in time to kill by 3 milliseconds. And when you're looking at the upsides, the difference is kind of mind-boggling. It also has ridiculously strong attachments outside of those, like the granular grip, which gives you 8% BSA and 5% strafe, the VOD skeletal, which gives you 35% strafe speed, which is comparable to the OG Holger, on top of 10% BSA. I think this is one of the better options attachments regardless of what you're going to use for your other attachments. And also, if you're not going to use the mythic, it is one of the first weapons to have a unique red dot in the Nidar model 47, which has fantastic visibility. It makes for a great option, especially if you're looking for a more long-range build. And coming in at our number 1 spot is a gun that is starting to feel somewhat reminiscent to the CBR meta. It has been top dog for quite a minute now and will remain to be the case. The HVK is still the number 1 gun in the game. When you equip the large caliber ammo, this thing is an absolute monster at just about any range. It doesn't have quite the same consistency when it comes to 3-tapping as the DRH, but it has a faster rate of fire. It has a better headshot multiplier, which means it's capable of 2-tapping the head, which the DRH can no longer do. And obviously that faster rate of fire is going to result in faster time to kill in most situations. Obviously the HVK large cal has been banned from competitive play for quite a while now, so this isn't something that you're going to see pro players using. And interestingly enough, I've seen a decent number of people in my comments saying that they don't actually see HVKs in their lobbies, which if I had to guess is probably just an SBMM thing, because it is a gun that you do have to be fairly accurate with, in that it has a pretty small magazine capacity for its rate of fire, and you have to be able to land upper body shots for it to be effective. But there's no question it has the highest ceiling of any gun in the game. If you guys enjoyed, if you did, make sure to subscribe for more COD mobile content, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.